سلام دوستان عزیز، به اجوکیشن یونیورسیتی خوش آمدید. به دفتر اجوکیشن استیت دیپارتمنت. ما امروز یک سشن داریم درباره ایالات بهمون برنامه داریم. آقای دانشگاه باستون کالج هستند و درباره شرایط قبولی everybody, thank you so much. Education sponsored by State Department, Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs. Talk about architecture admission, general sense of what it means to study architecture. Studying architecture at Boston Architectural College. We have here one, if I pronounce your last name correctly. He is the International Student Advisor at Boston Architectural College. Very appreciative coming to this webinar, taking the time to talk to us about architecture, a little bit about his school and his work. So without further ado, why don't you introduce yourself, about your position, what your roles are, and the standards.
Okay, I just wanted to know the connection comes in and out just a little bit, so I'll do my best. So we're here to talk about studying architecture in the United States, as well as a little bit of information about Boston Architectural College. I wanted to inform you that very similar to architecture education around the world, it tends to be a pre-professional studies, pre-professional program, and so you obtain a professional degree towards licensure. In the United States, one of the main criteria to be a licensed architect is actually to complete a program from the NAB accreditation, which is the National Association or Architectural Board. They're the institution that will accredit institutions, and it's also what you will have to go ahead and complete a degree from a NAB accredited institution to be eligible for licensure in the United States. Currently, the United States has 154 NCARB accredited professional programs in the United States. There is one doctorate program, there are 95 master's programs, and there are 58 bachelor's programs that are approved by NAB. So what we're talking about, what does architecture accreditation mean is the primary, and I'm going to read here the statement my colleague had put in there for me, is primary means by which programs assure quality to students and the public. Accredited status in a is assigned to students and the public that the institution or program meets the minimum standards for the faculty curriculum and student services in their libraries, right? So you're looking at making sure that the program that you're applying to, if your goal is potentially to be a licensed architect in the United States, is to seek that NAB accreditation. There are many programs in the United States, and there's a lot of them that are not accredited. You can go anywhere from an associate's degree in, for example, architectural engineering, architectural technology, up to graduate studies in architecture and masters in architecture, and all those programs will, if they're not NAB accredited, then licensure in the United States, you will eventually have to finish a program that is NAB accredited. Some resources also that you want to look at is to see U.S. education design school rankings. You can look at Design Intelligence, and that would be www.di.net. It's a great location where you look at architecture, landscape architecture, interior architecture, and industrial design. Other key resources would be the Association of Collegiate Colleges of Architecture. Since we are in a design school, what ends up happening is we are adjacent to one of the wood shops, and so unfortunately it would be, like I indicated at this time, that we are going through getting ready for thesis, final projects. All our labs are highly in use, so our students are engaged in their final projects all the time, so please forgive for that.
Sorry for interrupting you.
No, not a problem. I can provide you with the information on the links for Design Intelligence and the Association of Collegiate College Schools of Architecture. The other one is the National Architecture Accrediting Board, NAB, so that way you guys can find the programs in the areas that you are seeking to live and study, you know. So in architecture, just like in most other countries, the programs are traditionally 5-year programs. They're traditionally longer than most other programs in the United States and around the world. And the traditional program is about 4 years. It's about 5 years at a bachelor's level, right? And so our program's a little bit different. Our program will be 6 years, but one of the things is we're in line with licensure requirements. And so, like there's other programs that incorporate the work component into their program. Some schools will have internship classes, some programs will have co-op classes, or like ourselves, we have a practicum work requirement, in all trying to get students to really look at design education and be able to be out in the field and working at the same time, working and studying concurrently. Is there any questions that you might have?
So the basic foundation information.
Give me 1 second. Sean's at the door.
Okay.
So my colleague Sean's here, and he can definitely talk more about studying architecture and design in the United States. And I just basically just starting out a little bit about talking about the resources for selecting a design school and talking about NAB accreditation and what does that mean.
Okay, great. So, good afternoon, evening, and thank you for joining. I know that Juan has probably been a really great resource so far. I'm Sean O'Rourke. I'm the Director of Sustainable Design here at the BAC. Did you give them an update or introduction to the BAC as a whole?
No, I think, Cinda, will you introduce Sean?
Yeah, sure. I just wanted to introduce Sean. I think Sean is actually, I'm looking through my email trying to exactly. So he's the Director of Sustainable Design at Boston Architectural College. As I've been told, Sean has more info about architecture education in the United States as a whole, and we're very grateful for having him participate in this webinar. So if you can just go ahead and, what Juan was doing, he was, I think, reading through the PowerPoint that we put together. The point of this webinar is to give a general sense of what it means for an international student, more specifically, an Iranian international student, to come to the United States. And from speaking to Juan, I have an understanding that Boston Architectural College takes a different approach than most architecture institutions in the U.S. And I know there's a slight difference. So if you can just give us a general sense of architecture in the U.S. and then you can touch on the differences at BIC and just give us an overview of your school. That would, because I understand.
Sure. Absolutely. Thank you for the introduction. So architecture education in the United States is really regulated or overseen by an accrediting body, which I think Juan has mentioned, which is the National Architecture Accrediting Board. And all schools in the United States that are underneath this umbrella of an architecture accrediting board or meet their standards are what we call professional programs. And these professional programs is something that's really important for you to look at if you're looking to study architecture in the United States. Professional or accredited programs will allow a graduate to be eligible to sit for licensure. If you're interested in practicing in the United States, achieving your license and being a practicing licensed architect, graduating from a NAB or NAAB accredited school is very important. So for all of the students who have logged in, make sure that you're always asking whether is this a NAB accredited school. Why that's important also is that it keeps the standard or quality level of a curriculum in architecture. The Boston Architectural College is a fully accredited program at our undergraduate and graduate level for the National Architecture Accrediting Board. So all of our students who do graduate from these programs are eligible to sit for licensure after a period of internship or practice hours and credits within the professional arena. So that's the first thing that I would mention that's really important for everyone out there to look at. Every school across the United States looks at architecture a little bit differently. You'll take very similar courses because they are held by the accrediting body, but each one has a different sort of perspective on what design means in their school. Some schools are very interested in how you can engage the public, doing good for social communities. Other programs are very good at technical applications. They maybe skew more towards engineering. Other programs look at how is sustainability becoming a major part of our practice in architecture. The BAC sort of looks at a lot of those different factors, but what makes us different is that we really believe in this idea of learning by doing. So our students are engaged in practice or application of taking what they learn in the classroom and taking it to a job. And as an international student under the visa, and Juan can talk a little bit more about this, you are eligible to work in the United States at a certain number of hours. So it's a tremendous opportunity for an international student coming to the BAC, is being able to work, get experience in the United States, and then be able to take that experience back home. As part of your graduation requirements, you have to complete a number of academic credits towards graduation, but you also have to have a series of practice experiences. And those experiences will be judged not by how much time you've spent in practice or learning by doing, but what have you learned? And that's what I think sets us apart from other schools, is that we're evaluating you on your learning as well as your curriculum. So it's a really interesting sort of dialogue between practice and education. And I'm sure that many of you on the call think that, okay, well, how do I become an architect? How do I practice architecture? What does that even mean? Very early in your program at the BAC, students are engaged in what practice means. What does it mean to be an architect? And that can mean something different to everybody, but you have the ability to experience that while you're in school. It's a trend that's starting to become more common in the United States, is this idea of sort of learning by doing. Some programs are embedding it directly into their curriculum. Some programs are sort of have set internship programs where year 3 you have to go for a semester or for a year and go and practice. Ours is what we call concurrent. So the students are practicing and going to school at the same time.
Most programs around the world right now are having that, going from a semester of internship or practicum, usually in your 3rd semester, to doing a full year of actually work requirements, only because they're seeing the same thing that the BAC has seen for a long time, is that concurrent model of studying and working at actually is very, very beneficial for the development of an architect and a designer.
Mm-hmm.
So does that mean
the other? Sorry, go ahead.
I had a quick question. Does that
Please.
mean if students finish the course, if they finish their studies and let's say finish 6 years for undergrad, would they automatic? I mean, do they still have to sit for exams, for examinations, for license?
Yeah, unlike most other countries, students, okay, in some countries there are different pathways. You complete a architecture degree from an accredited institution. At the end of that degree, you are designated an architect, and you can sign building plans and all that. In some countries, you'll have to go ahead and then take a test, and then you pass the test and you become a licensed architect. And some of them have a work requirement before you do all the paperwork, take the test. The United States, if I'm correct, you have a NAB accredited institution, which John and myself both said is like one of the main things, the work requirements associated, plus tests. So in the United States, you'll do all the series of 3 things before you can actually be a signing architect. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, that makes sense. Because you said you have some sort of agreement with the accredited institution, the institution that accredits architectural programs. So I was just wondering.
Like we're in line with the requirements. Like Sean was saying, is we have that work component within our curriculum, and we try and facilitate students with assistance with like the department heads as well as the practice department to guide them and gear them to make sure that they're satisfying not only our degree requirements, but also the requirements that are needed in the work component of aiming towards licensure to be met at the same time. So they're doing their professional development, their practice hours, and logging those hours to be able to sit those licensing exams, if that's the path that they chose.
Because I understand there's other architectural schools in the United States, like Drexel University, that also offers co-op. My understanding is that this is kind of similar to co-op, where students would take classes and have formal training and then work in the field at the same time. So I guess, correct me if I'm wrong.
No, like I mentioned earlier, there's many different types of programs in the United States, right? And there are programs that incorporate within their curriculum internship classes, or like Drexel and Northeasterns will do co-ops, and depending on the degree that you're studying, you have a certain number of co-op classes or that you will take that will allow you to get professional work experience, and that's integrated into their curriculum as well. Is we're in line in the total number of hours associated with professional licensure requirements versus some schools have like 3 co-ops or 3 internship classes or 1 practicum class incorporated into their curriculum.
So,
but every school.
So at your undergraduate level, when does practical experience begin? Like when do you encourage students to work in the fields? I mean, do they immediately, start, or how does that work? I mean, if I'm a student and have absolutely no experience in architecture, never worked in a firm, I don't have any practical experience, how does that work?
That's a great question. At the undergraduate level, we very rarely have students engaged in practice that's related to architecture or whatever their design field is before their second year. Oftentimes, many students take a little time to figure out that this is what they want to do. They learn enough to be able to get employed. Usually takes till after their second year to be able to be engaged in practice fully, or be able to be hired by an architecture or a firm, so that student can actually be productive in the workplace. So many of our students, our best students, are getting jobs after their second year. We do have some practice opportunities here on campus. We work a lot with our local community on with local nonprofits, local smaller design firms, where student teams are being run by a practicing professional, and we consider that practical experience as well. But I think more directly to your question, most students are not getting employed in a design firm without prior experience before the end of their second year.
So another thing that kind of comes to my mind is, why would a student want to pursue a graduate degree in architecture if they can, if they can take the exam for a licensure, they can take that exam after a bachelor's degree or an undergraduate degree. Why would someone would want to pursue graduate education in us?
So
more
in,
specifically at our institution.
yep. So in the United States, the bachelor's degree and master's degree are both considered first professional degrees. So in order to be eligible for the master's program, you don't have to have a prior experience with architecture or design. There's a very similar curriculum between the undergraduate and graduate programs. The graduate programs obviously are they expect more. The classes are a little bit more focused, but the overall curriculum and content is very similar. Many architecture firms and design firms in the United States recently have really pushed for graduate level degrees. While you can become a licensed architect with an accredited professional undergraduate degree, the architecture firms around the country, around the United States, seem to like the graduates of the graduate program a little bit more because they have a little bit more maturity. They have another undergraduate degree from something else that they bring to the table to influence their design work. So in the United States, we're finding that our graduate students are more prepared for practice, and it just seems that that's where the opportunities for employment are.
And like I mentioned before, there's so many programs in the United States that are not NAB accredited. So someone can finish a non-NAB accredited program and work in the field, and then they're seeking to move up in their firm, start their own practice, and they then realize that they want to be licensed.
Yep.
And, and just to be clear, at the BAC, we don't require prior degree in the field for our master's level, where in a lot of programs in the United States, in order to actually go into the master's program, you will have to show some related degree or studies in the field. Would that be traditional in most of the programs?
Yeah, I would say largely, though, most of the programs are first professional. They don't require a prior degree in architecture. Will it help your application if you have taken architectural courses or you have an undergraduate degree in design? Absolutely, but it does not. It's not a requirement, as it isn't here at the BAC.
Okay, so in a way, BAC is kind of unique. So I guess the thing that kind of excuse me. So I'm gonna have this question. It's gonna be in two parts. Basically, I'm gonna ask about the admission process. I don't know if you have a general sense of what the admission process for architectural programs are in the United States, both at undergraduate and master's level, and then talk briefly about the admissions process for your school. And as you mentioned that you don't require any prior experience at your master's level, so what is it that you're looking for in students? Is it academic success during their undergraduate studies? Is it certain tests, examinations that they have to take before applying to BAC? And yeah, so just give us a general sense of like if somebody wants to study architecture at a bachelor's level, what is the general admission requirements and master's level, and then talk about BAC.
You want to do the general admissions process?
Sure. So generally in the United States, for the undergraduate program, SAT, which is the standardized test for college admissions, is required. And to be able to study be an architecture major in the undergraduate, they're mostly looking at demonstrated success in your high school diploma, any extracurricular activities that you may have done. Some architecture and design programs are also looking at a potential portfolio of creative work, photography, writing, because a big part of the design world is creativity, right? And while you may not have any direct experience with architecture drafting or building design, that ability to think creatively is a critical component of success. So a lot of admissions process will look at, okay, what is the creative aptitude of the student as well as their academic performance? At the graduate level, many programs are looking at, have you taken courses in architecture and design? And design can be interpreted broadly, right? That can be anything from photography to landscape design, to interior design, or even taking a drafting course, or ways to communicate graphically in the computer. So graduate programs will look at academic success from your undergraduate, any sort of your interests in thinking creatively and practicing creatively, and what sort of difference you want to make in the world. That's a major piece, and I think one might talk to that about our essay process of architecture and design has the ability to kind of create a major impact in our built environment and create a healthier, more sustainable world. And so applicants for design degrees, we really look for what is your vision for the future, and how do you want to contribute or be a change agent in making a more sustainable place? So I want to talk about the BAC's admissions process.
Yeah,
Is it different?
Yeah, we have a very different approach. The philosophy of our admission stems from the philosophy that anybody that truly is passionate and has the desire to pursue design education at any level should be supported and given the right to do so. So we have a very straightforward approach for both bachelor's and master's, because we want those people that have that passion and that desire, and I believe the school and everybody here has that passion to commit to a student to help them succeed. Academically, we can show you how to draw. We can show you how to draft. We can talk to you about what's going on in the industry. One thing we can never show you is that passion and the desire to pursue design education. So if you have that seed, that feeling within you, then we want to foster it and help you grow and help you get to where you want to go professionally. So for undergraduate program, we do not require the SAT or ACT test scores. We just need to verify that you have completed your secondary education. You're going to do the online application. You're going to submit a current resume or CV, and we understand that at the completing high school, you might not have an extensive work history, and that's okay. We can have a basic functional resume, right? And then we need to go ahead and prove your English proficiency. We take the TOEFL and the IELTS and the PET exam. For the TOEFL, it's a 79. For the IELTS, it's a 6.5. Or for the PET exam, we take a 53. For those students that have not been studying English at their high school or taking and want to come to the United States and take English classes prior to, we do have some conditional admission programs with some affiliated language schools. But just those 5 items will give an initial review for admissions for an undergraduate student. As I mentioned, I did not mention, there's no portfolio requirement. There is a creative exercise requirement that is not a portfolio. What it is an exploration of that creative energy and process that Sean was talking about. It is a simple 2 essays, 2 art piece exercise. You're exploring yourself creatively in 2 different essays, and then one is tell us about yourself artistically. You express yourself in artistic, through design. The other one is answering a question through an art piece. And so we're just looking at where you are creatively. How do you address a topic in your creative process? And there's no real right or wrong answer on that. So that, people do take that as a portfolio, but it's not. It's just we're trying to explore your creative process energy, you can say. And we're very straightforward in that admissions decision. At the graduate level, there's a little bit more of an additional requirement for international students. We still have those same 5 requirements. It's going to be the application. We need official transcripts from your college. We're going to need your resume. We're going to need your English proficiency and the creative exercise. So it's going to be the same 5 requirements in the same process. With that alone, a graduate student will also receive an admissions decision. Where it changes a little bit for a graduate level program is if you do have prior experience in architecture or design, then at that point what we will need is a foreign credential evaluation, with a course-by-course evaluation so that we can maximize any transfer credit possibilities, as well as a design portfolio so that we can see what you've done. If it's fashion design, if it's art studio, we might not need a portfolio at that time from you, but if you have architecture, interior design, interior architecture, landscape architecture, at that point we will want to have a design portfolio so that we can maximize transfer credits and see where your skill level, because one of the big differences with the BAC completing the program is for our bachelor's and master's degree, you don't only have the credits that you would complete a degree. We also assess the professional practice hours and skill level of a professional. So to graduate the BAC, you do need to have 3 different graduation requirements, which is the academic credits, the professional skill level, and the professional work hours, right? So we're using that design portfolio with the curriculum and sheets and the syllabus to see what maximized amount of transfer credits we can give you. Because, like I said, we're here to foster someone with a passion, a desire to get to where they want to be professionally in whatever pathway you want to be. If licensure is your end goal, we want to facilitate that path for you. If you want to do something more creative, then we want to facilitate that for yourself too.
Great. Okay, so I guess the next question for me is maybe Sean can. I think this question should have come towards the beginning of this webinar. It looks like that we have lost. We got disconnected and lost our guest. دوستان عزیز که برای چند لحظه‌ای lost Sean. Sorry,
Hello?
I lost you. Yeah, I lost you for a
we
second.
Lost connection there, and I see that we do have a question, right?
Yeah, now I can see.
Great.
A second, I'm sorry.
So you had started to ask a question just before we got cut off. I apologize.
Yeah, that's fine. I'm just gonna start the question. I feel like I put everybody on the stage, but it's fine. I'm gonna ask the question. As I was saying, I think that I should have asked this question towards the beginning of this webinar because I think it's very important. But again, we talked about a lot of other useful information. So the question I have in mind that I think any student would want to ask who's interested to study architecture in the US is basically we have at Education USA we have a step called 5 steps, and researching your options is step 1. So if I'm a student in Iran and want to come to the United States and study architecture, as we know, as you explained, there's so many diverse programs, that have different requirements, that have different structures in terms of training, accreditation, all that stuff. What do you recommend students keep in mind? What is your advice to students just to start and pick a school in the United States, get to the goal of becoming an architect? What is your recommendation? How do you start? How do you start looking for the program that's right for you?
Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of schools, as I mentioned earlier, and I think probably Juan mentioned even before that. There's a number of resources out there. One place to start would be with an organization called Design Intelligence, which puts together a ranking of the top architecture, interior design schools every single year. And that's a great way of showing, okay, what are the best schools in the country? And when I say best, I need to qualify that. Those schools are right for certain people, but they're not right for everybody. So that's why I think it's very important for students to look at the National Architecture Accrediting Board website. And that website is www.naab.org, and I think Juan is going to type it into the chat room. I think that'll be a great place for you to see which professional programs are in the United States, and they'll give you links to those schools. As I mentioned, every school is going to have a different perspective. Many schools have a big international population. Other schools have a very small international population. Some schools are very large schools, and they don't have a very good sort of personal touch with students. You go into an incoming class of 100+ students, and you don't really get to know your faculty well, as opposed to, say, the BAC, which is a very small school. You'll get to know your faculty, your department heads, and your administrators extremely well. It really depends on what your interest is, but some of the links that Juan just added to the chat room I think will be a great place for your students to start with that sort of step one.
Okay, so the first website, because this session is going to be recorded and put on Education USA website, social media. I don't think that the chat room portion of this session will be included, so I'm just going to read it again. It's www.naab.org, and then
correct.
You said they can use that for rankings and a lot of useful accreditation and getting licensed.
Well, that website that you just mentioned is the National Architecture Accrediting Board website. That'll give you statistics about the schools, which schools are accredited as professional programs. The other website that I think is very important is Design Intelligence, and that is also www.di.net, and that's the website that puts out the annual rankings. And it'll just give a great opportunity for students to look at what certain programs are doing, some rankings, some of the top schools in the United States. But again, that's not that doesn't always mean it's the best school for you. It's just a resource of showing, what are some of the top ranked schools in the United States.
So when somebody is considering architecture school, they need to really keep in mind, from my understanding, what is their personality? In terms of location, where do they want to study? Also, if they want to study at an institution that puts a lot of emphasis on training as opposed to academic work, they just need to on their own.
Yeah, I agree. I think the National Architecture Accrediting Board website, one of the things that it has that's really, really important is you can go and search what programs are accredited by state. So if somebody really wanted to study in Massachusetts, you can go in there and look for accredited programs in Massachusetts and provide you a list of the NAB accredited programs. So if the goal is licensure, as we've talked here, that's key, is to complete your program with the school that's NAB accredited. Then that's a great step. You won't be going too much further than looking at programs that are outlined by that program, but you understand that there's constantly programs being approved each year. But I think that would be it's a good step.
So from my understanding, to be able to be a licensed architect, that examination also administered by the NAA?
It's administered by another organization. That makes it quite complicated because there's many organizations. So that's separate from the National Architecture Accrediting Board. The NAAB is really the first step of having an NAAB accredited degree, and then you work in with another organization towards licensure.
What is that organization?
That organization is NCARB, NCARB.
NCARB.
That's the National Council of Architecture Registration Board.
So, but to be able to, like, let's say somebody comes in at a graduate level and they do have some undergraduate experience in architecture, to be in a program that also incorporates training and working in the field, do they need to have license to be able to practice? I mean, at a firm or work at a firm? Let's say somebody is studying architecture at a master's level at BAC. Do they need to be licensed in order to kind of be in the field and work in the field as is required by your
Great question. You do not have to be licensed to be able to practice in an architectural capacity. So, for example, all of our students are working in some way, right? They're working in a design firm. They're working on projects. They're not able to call themselves an architect. Usually, they're called an architectural designer. They're working in the field. The difference is when you become a licensed architect, you can stamp. You can actually say, this drawing is good and we can build from it, right? There's a sort of health, safety, and welfare condition. But students who are in the program, even architecture, undergraduate degree, or studying for the first time as a graduate student, you can work in an architecture firm and practice architecture underneath a licensed architect.
Okay, great. Okay, I think that leads us to, go ahead, sorry.
I think another key thing students need to also look is, we're talking about what is the end goal of licensure here in the United States or work in the United States. One thing that students also have to remember is part of the visa process is saying, obtain your degree in your studies and return home to work. I think it's very important, sometimes it gets missed, doesn't get looked at as much, is a student also needs to go ahead and look at how an institution's degree is recognized by the accrediting and licensing board in your home country. So you need to want to make sure that what are the requirements from education abroad to return home and be licensed to work in Iran.
Yeah, that's great.
That's one thing. You don't want to invest time and energy in any of the wonderful programs that are in the United States and then return home and then realize that you could have done one track versus another, independent of school, that would have been recognized differently at your local licensing company or accreditation company.
Yeah, thank you so much for pointing that out, because I think that was missed. And I know that for getting a U.S. visa, we go back to the a lot of students also end up staying and working. I mean, but that shouldn't be the end goal, I guess.
That's a luxurious benefit of But yeah, sometimes life happens and you have to return home, and then you just want to make sure that you're looking at those pathways as well, independently of what program you've chosen, what career path you've done, because you don't want to go home and then all of a sudden you find out that it wasn't recognized. And then it's a tragic time lost.
Okay, so this question is basically very important because a lot of my students ask this question. It's about financial aid and like this question is directed at both of you and asking this. Just as any other questions that I asked you, if you could give us a general sense of financial aid in the field of architecture for students, and then versus BAC.
Well, IIE produces a very extensive how to finance your study in the United States. That website, that book, it is, I would say, indispensable. It's something that you really need to look through and see. There are a lot of institutions that have institution-based scholarships. It's just essentially money that the school is allocating for scholarships. And so there will be scholarships out there for different reasons, for different degrees. In architecture, I think the number of those would be extremely different in like the general population of scholarships, but there are probably more institutional-based scholarships that are given. So for any specific school, like Sean said, we're a small school. We really have only been into the international student game now about 5 years or so, where we're really making an effort of recruiting international students. Right now we're about 90 international students, about 13% of the student population, from about, as you can tell from the students welcoming you here, and it's in Farsi right here, saying welcome.
Yeah, so Farsi, which was
right there.
very nice.
So we do have some Iranian students here, but the thing being is the BAC has currently more scholarship and aid for one student start our program. But about a year ago, we were lucky enough to get some money for incoming scholarships. That's across the board. So we don't have anything that's international student specific. It's basically for students coming to the BAC. So any student, we're rolling admissions, open admissions. So as long as you satisfy the priority filing deadline, all students that satisfy that priority filing deadline go through the initial review for the Dean's Award. And the Dean's Award varies depending on how much the Budget Committee Finance Committee approves each year, but it could be anywhere from $1,000 to $2,000 a semester, and it's a renewable scholarship into the completion of the program. And all students are eligible to be considered, not only international students, although I have been guaranteed that there are some that will be always given out to international students, as we understand that's a piece. But very, very big difference finances to other programs. Since we do require a professional work practice, you'll be working in a professional firm, having a regular income as you're going through the program as well.
Those firms, basically, from my understanding, have some sort of agreement with BAC, and do they directly pay students, or does BAC pay students?
Yeah, no. So the firms will pay. So they, based on the practical training provisions of the federal regulations, there is the curricular practical training that indicates that as long as the work is an integral component of the established curriculum, students can engage in professional practice or work for pay as well. So students can be doing anywhere from paid, part-time, full-time, volunteer positions in an arraignment of different type of employment opportunities throughout the Boston area. Students can be working at a small design firm or a international firm like ACOM, you know, here in Boston, to like your basic design job that actually will count towards practice requirements.
So basically, they can earn credit for the hours they're working towards graduation.
Yeah, correct. So, and that's something that a lot of
use that, like the income that they earn from their practical practice, practical work, to apply it to their tuition. Do you have those cases?
Yeah, there are some students that can do that. You know, the employment based on the immigration regulation should be focused on the academic component, right? But like a student could get an on-campus job working in the library or working in a food service industry on the campus and get that money that they need for everyday life, or they can do the same amount of hours working professionally in their field, understanding how the field is changing dynamically week to week, day to day. So we believe that getting them out there and seeing how the field is ever so changing and growing on a daily basis, that it's the same type of money that they're getting for their everyday expenses, but they're actually developing a professional career at the same time.
Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to understand if I read this correctly. So that rule of being able to work under 20 hours per week on campus doesn't apply at BAC International?
No, So the regulations indicate that on-campus employment is incidental to status, so students can still find an on-campus employment, and that would be on-campus employment through the federal immigration regulations. But then there's the provisions of practical training, where most people only focus on the OPT portion of optional practical training of the practical training regulations, which is post-degree, but there is the curricular practical training part of practical training where we can actually assist the students to obtain professional work experience during the curriculum, during the field of study.
So they can work, let's say, full-time off campus.
They could work 20 hours during the semester and then 40 hours during non-scheduled semester times, as the regulations indicate.
Okay, that's very useful. I don't have any other specific questions. I mean, if there's any other comments or anything else you want to let students know, I mean, I think the most important things about, I know somebody asked a question here, typed it, it was about financing, touched on. But yeah, I mean, is there anything else you want to talk about, like any other thing about BAC that you want to let students know, anything in particular? Any other interesting activities or anything?
Yeah, I think one mentioned it briefly, but another sort of selection criteria for the students to look at is where the school is located. A lot of times, schools around the country will use their surrounding area as what we like to call a learning laboratory. We have the benefit of being in an amazing city like Boston, where we use the city to our advantage. We get students out into the city from day one in the programs. We think it's extremely important for students not only to learn in the classroom, but out in the city as well. Looking at buildings, how has the city evolved? How do people move around the city? I think that's a really important component of our program. If you were in a different area of the country, your learning laboratory would be different. I guess it depends on the student if they want a sort of rural experience or if they want an urban experience, if they're a city that they're interested in. The location of the program or where the school is should be a part of the decision-making process because it will influence how you learn and where you learn.
Great, thanks. Once again, I wanted to thank you guys both for participating in this webinar. I really appreciate the time and energy. I know this is the final. You guys have busy schedules, but thank you so much, and I really appreciate Education USA. Really proud of the partnership with higher education community.
Thank you very much for inviting us.
Great, thank you.
No problem. Again, we had Sean. What was your last name? I'm sorry.
My last name is O'Rourke.
O'Rourke. We had Sean O'Rourke and Juan
Venegas. Venegas.
Yeah, I'm horrible with like last name pronunciations. Sean is the Director of Sustainable Design at Boston Architectural College, and Juan is International Student Advisor at Boston Architectural College. Thank you very much. I hope that we keep in touch, and I hope from this webinar you have more Iranian students interested in studying at BAC, and they get a general sense of what it means to study architecture. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Good day.